Hello and welcome, Shirley, to the Soul Aligned Self Care Podcast. I am so excited to talk to you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
So, to get started, could you let the listeners know a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yes, my name is Shirley Buck. I am a mother, a grandmother. I live in the Chicagoland area. My most favorite thing that I do is being a grandmother, a mother too, but the
Yeah.
grandkids kind of came along and took precedence. But I'm a mindset transformation coach, and I'm also the author of an international best-selling book as well.
Oh, what's the book's name?
Sweet Freedom Whispered in My Ear.
Nice. I love books. I'm a big reader. So, we'll have to talk about that a little bit. But before we talk about that, can you just tell me how you started? How did you move into this work that you do? How long have you been doing it and stuff like that?
I have been doing it for quite a while. I wrote the book to kind of do what I do on a bigger scale because I wanted to reach more people, to
Hmm.
inspire more people that have been through trauma and abuse, and give them a different way of attempting to overcome it, because I myself had been through years of severe trauma and abuse. The book goes into it pretty deep, but I can run through a quick. My whole childhood, teenage years. I was born to deaf parents. They were divorced when I was 5. I interpreted the divorce. I mean, being a child of deaf parents places a lot of responsibility on you as it is. And
Hmm.
then my mother became an alcoholic. I lived with my mother. She became an abusive alcoholic, and she took her life at my age of 13, and she tried to take my life as well. Um, and then it just snowballed into more trauma and abuse and addictions and um, eating disorders. I was everywhere on the scale from 80 pounds to 200 pounds. So, I mean, it was a lot of trauma and abuse. And like I said, the book really tells my story, but not only tells the story, it actually, at the end of each chapter, talks about, tips and advice on how I overcame those certain things that are happened to me. So it's also a book of tools as well.
Yeah,
So,
I love
yeah,
that. I love the way you set it up too. Like you tell a story and then solution, story, solution like that, right? Cool. Very
yeah.
cool. I like that.
I've been told for years that I should write a book, and I just never did it. And one day, one person and just yet another person said, "You really need to write a book." And I don't know why, but it clicked. I said, "Yeah, you're right." Went
Hmm.
home and I wrote a book. So I guess I had to be in a place when I was really ready to do that,
Hmm.
because my way of overcoming, or have that I overcome what I have been through, was not to live in the past, was not to focus, was to change my mindset, to think a different way, perceive things a different way. So for me to go back and revisit isn't something I do. So,
Hmm.
but it was very helpful to have my grandkids, because they kept me here when I had to go back there. So,
That's nice. Yeah.
yeah, that was really a beautiful thing. And then my publisher was like, "Wow, like it's kind of intense." So, at the end of the book, I had all kind of tips and advice and tools. And she said, "Well, why don't you take those and kind of break it up at the end of each chapter, so you can keep reminding the reader you're okay? Because otherwise they're just like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Is she okay? What's happening, So
Yeah.
it was really good advice from my publisher. So I did that, and I love the way the book came out, and I've had tons of beautiful feedback, and it really means a lot to me.
That's cool. I really love that. So you say that you've learned to heal from trauma and abuse in a non-traditional way, right? So what does that
Yes.
mean?
Okay. So when I was 18, I got my own apartment and, my own car, and I got out of everything I was living in. And I just thought I'm doing really well. And, but I was still partying. Partying was a way of kind of, oh, I'm fine. I'm partying with my friends and like kind of just ignoring the problem. By the time I was 23, I was engaged and to a great guy that I actually trusted. It was a good person, and I felt safe for the first time. We moved in together, and you think when I felt safe for the first time, everything would be good, but that's exactly when everything went wrong. I fell apart. I had a nervous breakdown, couldn't get out of bed, couldn't go to work. Everything just came to the surface.
Hmm.
So, I was always told that you should probably see a therapist for everything you've done, like, over the years. And I was, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. So when it came to that point, I didn't want to see a therapist. And I'm not saying that it's wrong for people to see therapists, but in my mind, I was like, okay, all I'm going to do is tell my story, tell her what happens to me. We're going to talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. I'm going to have to like focus on the problem. I don't want to focus on the problem. And then I feel like if I get upset while I'm focusing on the problem, they're gonna give me meds, and then I'm just gonna band-aid what I'm feeling while I'm dealing with it. And I was like, I just want a different way. So I started grabbing, I've always been very independent because, I was pretty much on my own most of my life. But so I had this, I can do this. I'll do it myself. So I started, devouring every self-help book I possibly could. And the things that came to me that resonated with me was more along the lines of changing my mindset, thinking a different way. And I was really interested in that. And I started to study like different phobias people have. And, um, something that I would be like, wow, someone really believes that? That's not, it's like distorted. And then I'm like, well, what I'm thinking is distorted. And so it was like, I just started really learning about um, phobias, thoughts, anxiety, depression, alcoholism, all this stuff.
Hmm.
And I started to change my mindset and train my mind how to think, and I literally would, when I got a thought that I didn't want to think, I would literally in the beginning have to like crumble it up in my mind and imagine me throwing it in the trash can. Like I did all kinds of exercises, but you know, as the years kept going, I just kept changing my mindset, and now I have the tools to pretty much think like that most of the time. Like I'm human, I'm going to have contrast in my life, right? But
Hmm.
um I know how to stay aligned, and I'm also an energy healer. So, you know, we vibrate on different frequencies. So I try to stay, on a frequency that's connected to source and stay in a more positive sense. But I have the tools to get back there when, things don't go right during the day, or I have a bad week, or, things like that. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not talking about from my past. I'm just talking about life in general.
yeah. There's always going to be ups and downs. Yeah.
Right.
So when that thought pops into your head, the one that you don't want to think, and you crumple it up and throw it away, what is your process to change your mind? Is it a reframing? Is it
Yes,
what is,
it is kind of a reframing. It's it's all kinds of different things I do. Like one of the things I do is, okay, I am aware of my emotional scale. So I teach people to be aware of their emotional scale. So if you're not feeling good, you're not thinking good. Then you start to become more aware of your thoughts. Then you start to think, well, you start to focus on the abundance of the world. And there's abundance all around us, right? Trees, animals, flowers, the sky. There's so much abundance. There's so much beauty. Then you can start, with what you're thankful for. And some people, that's a real struggle for because they may be in a situation where it's hard to do that. So you kind of have to take yourself out of that situation. I teach taking ownership. So not blaming somebody else for the way our life is, and not saying, well, I can't do it because this person is always, putting me down, or that, so taking ownership is very powerful. Um, I teach people to focus on the gifts that they received from whatever they had been through. And I don't always work with people who've been through severe trauma and abuse. Some people just get stuck in a certain mindset and they're negative and they want to get out of that.
Hmm.
So, just being aware of the gifts that you've received from things that may not have been so great that happened to you. You know, a very important one is being childlike, learning how to stay childlike. I believe that so many people get caught up in like the news when we're adults. Like
Yeah.
there's news, telling us the world's bad, the economy's bad. There's so many different illnesses out there. And I mean, I'm surprised not everybody's walking around depressed,
Yeah.
it's,
Well,
we're
I think a lot of
bombarded,
people are.
exactly.
Yeah.
But I don't focus on that. I don't watch news. I get a daily skim in my email. And I do what I can to take steps to participate in things that I believe in, but things I can't control and I can't do anything about, I don't focus on that.
Hmm.
I focus more on what my circle is and the life I created, because it is all perception, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
So, it's as easy as there was a time after the pandemic, I was driving back into the city of Chicago to see clients, and every time I drove to the city, there was garbage on the street. And one of the things I was so proud about our city is like, oh, it's so clean. It's like a big city, but it's so clean. And it wasn't. I was being aware of my emotional scale, and like I feel terrible every time I'm driving into the city. So I'm focusing on the garbage. Well, why am I focusing on the garbage when I could be looking up at the skylines, the clouds, the trees? Like, why am I focusing on garbage when I could be focusing on beauty? And it is that simple. It's not always
Hmm.
easy, but it is that simple.
I agree. I think it is that simple. And like there are some things that we control, like we can control, and I do a lot of this work with my clients where I teach them how to, I call it decluttering, but it's not in a sense of it's not just your space, it's like
Right.
everything around you. So the media that you expose yourself to is so important, and you do have complete control over that. And I don't watch the news either because it really it changes the way I feel. And to
Exactly. It
think
puts a
that
lot of fear in you.
it
It's
does, that's what sells, there's so
Mhm.
many good things going on in the world that you could focus on. And I think it's fair enough to say that there's just as much good things in the world. We're just not being fed that
I
stuff. You
I
have
think
to
it's
look
even
for it.
safe to say that there's more good in the world, to be honest, because I used to think about this. I used to think about, okay, I live in the city of Chicago. Everybody talks like it's the top murder capital of the world. It's
Yeah.
this terrible place, right? And I have a friend who lives in New York that told me she's terrified to come to Chicago. I'm like, you're in New York. What are you talking about? Like,
I know.
so, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking to myself, there has to be more good than bad in the world, because we all go out every day. We all participate in life.
Hmm.
Most of the time we go out, we're safe, we're, doing our thing, and we come home and we enjoy our family and the things we have. And so if the world was as bad as we're constantly being told it is, we wouldn't be able to step outside and take a walk and do all these things.
Yeah.
So I really
Yeah.
do believe there's more good. It's just we're bombarded with more bad news than good news,
We are. The bad news comes really easy because that's what's pushed towards us. And the good news is something that you have to be very intentional about, and you have to curate it for yourself.
Yeah.
And so it's like looking at your social media feed, looking at the TV shows you watch, the music you listen to.
Absolutely.
Like it's like everything. And then you can go into the people you expose yourself to, the people who you don't allow in your energy because you know how
Right.
it makes you feel. And so there's a lot of stuff that we can't control, as you said, but there's a lot of stuff that we can curate in order to make it a more positive view. And
Yeah.
those are the things to really focus on, as you said. And I like the way you put it. I focus on I'm not going to focus on the garbage. I'm going to focus on the skyline or the
Right.
sky. And I agree with you. It's as simple as that. It really is. And I wanted to also like just validate the fact that if you're positive all the time, it doesn't mean that everything around you is always going to be positive, because we're always having all these ups and downs in our life. It's about
Right.
having the tools that you need to be able to respond to those things in a way instead of react to them. You're not in a constant state of
Right.
reactivity.
Yes, and to be easy on ourselves. I think sometimes, like when you're in a position where you do help others, when you have a bad day, then you're like hard on yourself because, you're like, well, I know better.
Yeah.
But I also teach to have compassion for yourself, and self-love is so important. So
Hmm.
we wouldn't look at a child that's just learning how to walk and it falls down and say, "Get up, dummy."
Yeah.
Why aren't you walking yet? We have compassion, we have understanding, and we do
Hmm.
that for our friends and our family and our loved ones, but we don't have that for ourselves. We're always hard on ourselves. So being
Hmm.
easy on ourselves when we do have a bad day, like, okay, maybe I can't go from feeling terrible to wonderful, but I can work my way there
Yeah.
if I have the tools, and I'm going to be easy on myself while I'm doing that, you know?
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier the emotional, what is it called? The
Scale.
emotional scale. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect example. If it's the one that I think you're talking about, where it actually lists the different vibrations of all the moods that you have. Is that what you're
Yeah,
talking about?
I don't teach
Okay.
it that way, but yes, yes, I've seen
Yeah.
that scale,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you can't jump from one end of the spectrum to the other. Like you do
No.
have to, work your way out of it for sure.
Yes. Yeah. So you
Yeah,
can go from a state of anger or, um, shame or whatever that feeling is, and
right.
you could just go to a neutral feeling. You don't have to go from that to happiness, because that's kind of like going, like if you were driving a car 100 miles an hour, that's like taking a sharp right at 100 without slowing down.
Exactly.
It's more
Right, it's
about,
that momentum.
mm-hmm,
But if you start getting your momentum going in the right direction, then it
mm-hmm,
just keeps picking up, and
yeah,
I have a 90-day course that has weekly lessons with daily activities that kind of helps get your mind in that mindset and that groove in your
mm-hmm.
brain to start thinking in a different way. I use my hands a lot because of sign language.
Oh,
That
yes,
was
that's
my first
right.
language, so I use my hands a lot. I know somebody who was on a podcast was like, "Boy, you use your hands a lot." I'm like, "I know, I'm sorry."
Oh, well,
But
I'm from Long Island, New York, so everybody uses their
okay.
hands. Yes. Yeah, you know.
Exactly.
That reminds me, the first thing that popped into my head when you said your parents were deaf was the movie Coda. And I'm curious, did you see that movie? And
I did not. I do need to see it, and I've been told about it quite a bit, so I do want to see that. I haven't
it's a
seen it
sweet
yet.
movie. It's
Is
very
it?
sweet. Yeah, it's a good movie. And
Yeah, I've
the
heard.
what made
I
me
really need to watch it.
yeah, what made me think of it was the two parents were deaf, and the first child, who was the son, was also deaf, and then the youngest child, the daughter, was not deaf, and she was the translator for the whole family, and
Yeah,
like it was a
imagine.
lot of
Yeah.
pressure.
Is it
And
a true
so
story?
I actually don't know. I
I
don't
don't.
remember. I only saw it once,
Okay.
but I loved it. It was about a family in like New England. It was a fishing family, so they had a fishing business. So she had, she when they were selling stuff, she was doing the translation. She
Yeah.
was doing, going out fishing with her father before she went to school, and so it's like
Yeah.
her whole life revolved around supporting the family, which could be
Yes.
a lot of pressure. So that was the first thing I thought when you said that to me. I was like, that's just
Well,
just that alone.
that's one of the things when I was like 8, 9 years old, trying to take care of my mother who was an alcoholic, and she would get our food stamps and sell them for alcohol, or she would, when she would get her social security check, I would have to say, okay, wait a minute, we have to pay the rent first. And I wrote out the checks. Like I took care of her. So when, one of the main things I had to get over was guilt, because I was like, oh my God, like she committed suicide on my watch. Like I was supposed to take care of her. So
Yeah.
that was huge because that's all I did,
Yeah. That's huge.
And
And that was not something a child should have to do.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it's a different world when you grow up with deaf parents for sure.
I could imagine, like I can't really imagine, but Yeah, you'll have to let me know what you think of the movie because the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, I wonder how realistic this is. I'm like, I'm
Yeah,
wondering,
I need to
yeah,
watch it. I know, I really do need to watch it.
yeah. So talking about mindset again, when you're working with clients, what are some of the things, some of the biggest things that really come up in mindset? Is it like, so my first thought, and just I'm a mindset coach also, and one of the
Okay,
things that I see so often, and I'm wondering if you have the same experience, is that um, that I work with a lot of women, and a lot of these women are, as you said, so hard on themselves, but they have just like no self-love whatsoever, no self-worth. Like it's almost like they've been programmed. And I do think as women, we are programmed this way to put everybody else first before themselves. And so
yes.
even like just stepping out of somebody who's traumatized and healing from that, just a regular person that grew up as a woman. Do you find that you see, is that what you see also, that same type
That
of?
that is, and just this week, I started working with a client who has a hard time loving herself, and her particular reason is organized religion, because she grew up with a very strict organized religion
Mhm,
household, and they would say, like, you're a sinner, you're unworthy, they always made her, and I don't know how many others, but she personally always felt unworthy,
mhm,
so I really had to talk to her. The way that I started with self-love for me is I actually went back and revisited myself as a child in meditation.
mhm,
And I witnessed my mother abusing me, hitting me, whatever. And I went in and I held that child and I told her, you're beautiful, you're wonderful. Please don't think anything less of yourself. You're going to be okay. You're going to get through this. You're going to be strong. You're going to be, and all of that encouraging that I was giving this child, I was like, hey, wait a minute, that's me.
mhm.
That's me. Why don't I love me? Like, I would go out and help anyone else who's going through that, and I would encourage them, and so why would I be so hard on myself?
Yeah.
That child was me
Mhm,
and is me, so those are kind of one of the steps that I kind of talk about with them too. And then in her particular case, I was like, so you, because she was like, I love God, but I feel like I could never be in his presence, and I said, okay, so you love God, yes, so you think God is this wonderful creator, right? Yes, well, he created you, didn't he? Well, yeah. And I said, okay, well, wouldn't one of the greatest gifts you can give back to him is loving what he created, loving yourself? He created you. He gave you life. He does not think you're worthless. He
mhm,
wants you, like, he made the whole world full of abundance. He wants you to have abundance. Like, so it's just changing the perspective. And even with just one talk, she was starting to say, wow, okay, I never thought of it that way. So it's just
mhm,
like, it's just perceiving things differently. It's a different way of thinking about something. We all could, like, there could be two people who have the same experience. One person had a bad experience, one person had a great experience. So it is all in perception and the way you think and view things. And one of the favorite things I like to say that my grandma would say is like when it would come to like violent movies or anything like that, like, if you don't want it in your living room, why would you bring it into your living room?
mhm.
You know what I mean? So just turning it on your TV is bringing it into your living room, right?
Yeah.
So it's just that perception, the mind thought, changing that. And self-love is very hard, I think, for everybody, but mostly for women. I mean, we're
Mhm.
not allowed to age. We're not allowed to gain weight. We're not allowed to, you know what I mean? We're just
Yes.
constantly being told, you have to look like this to be beautiful, to be accepted.
Mhm,
And we're all conditioned as children,
mhm,
because, children look at TV and there's like, oh, this is what's accepted. This is, and you have to look like this. You have to act like this. You got to be cool. You got to, there's so much thrown at us. And that's why we all have to have our own mindset, our own thoughts. You know, we can't
Hmm.
be influenced by what the world wants us to be, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. We can go into like the damage that like social media causes for children and stuff like that. I mean, that would just be like a whole nother episode. Like it
Right,
just but I think one of the things that we need to remember, and yeah, women are really conditioned, and depending on your generation, I feel like this has gotten better as for the younger generations as we become I mean, if you think about it, really it's just like 2 generations ago women had to get married almost because they couldn't even have their own bank account. Like it's not wasn't
right,
that long
exactly.
ago,
Yeah,
so it's like
exactly.
crazy, so you have to think about how we were conditioned to even just survive. Like you have to be with a man, and in order to be with a man, you have to look this way, you have to act this way, be quiet, don't cause too much trouble, don't
Yeah,
cause it's like color inside the lines, it's just like this is what we're taught from a young age because our mothers, or our mothers' mothers were, this is how I had to survive. So I have to show my daughter how to survive,
right,
and we're
right.
slowly moving out of that, obviously.
Yes,
So,
and it's up to us to break that cycle, you know,
mm-hmm,
and I had to break all not only that cycle, but a cycle of abuse and a cycle of, you know,
mm-hmm.
unworthiness and all this stuff that I went through. And um thank God. I mean, I did a good job. My kids say I did a good job. They are, yeah, I mean, we've always been close. I never went through that stage where I hate you, mom, or you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
me
like,
either. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we've always been close and we're still very close. We travel together. My son and his wife come over once a week for movie night. My daughter, I talk to her 100 times a day, and we see each other 3 or 4 times a week easy. I see my grandkids a couple times a week. So we just have this very close knit family, and you know breaking the cycle, I don't take that lightly.
Mm-hmm.
I it was so important for me to do that. It was the most important thing for me to do. And that's another thing is like be proud of yourself when you do, no matter how small or how big it is, whatever good steps you're taking to for yourself, be proud of yourself. It's okay to be proud of yourself. It's okay. It's not arrogant. It's not bad. But we should love ourselves. We should be proud of ourselves. We
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't, downplay ourselves. I saw this lady at the coffee shop one day and I was like, oh my gosh, those boots are beautiful. Oh, they were very cheap. They were, and it was
I
like she
know.
apologized. And I was like, thinking about it, I don't care how much they cost. They're beautiful and they look lovely on you, and
Mm-hmm.
people feel like guilty for having something that someone else might like,
Mm-hmm.
and all those things boil down to self-love and self-confidence, and it's very important to
Yeah.
learn self-love.
Yeah, it's to be able to receive a compliment. It's a big
Yeah,
deal for a lot of ladies. That's
it
like
really
a
is.
very like a first step. And like you said earlier, it's the exercise going back to yourself and all these different age points, and giving yourself like the comfort that you need. I feel like that's such a great exercise, and I've done that myself. I even like found pictures of myself at the different ages, so I had like a visual like to look
Oh,
at.
nice,
And I
right.
think that's so powerful because it really helps you realize that we deserve as adults the same love that that child needs. And as you said, it's so easy to be nice to a child, so easy to be nice to your loved ones, your children,
Right.
your best friend. And it's like and I always say it's like love yourself at least as much as you love everybody else in your life.
Yeah, I
So,
think in order to be able to love and be loved in a healthy, wonderful way, we have to love ourselves first.
mhm,
We have to go inside always for anything that we need. We can't
mhm,
look for happiness from someone else. Someone else might bring happiness into our lives, but if we depend on them to bring that happiness, not only do they get resentful, but we get let down. So it's
yes.
like we have to learn to be happy. And if someone else enhances our life, that's a beautiful thing, but we shouldn't. expect it or, rely on it or pressure them to be that happiness. And
Mm-hmm.
that's, you know, so everything comes from inside. So we really do have to go inside in
Yeah.
order to find the joy.
Yeah, we really do. It is our responsibility to um, be able to be alone with yourself and love yourself, and then actually feel happy, feel
Yes.
content and
I love to
fulfilled.
take myself out to dinner and stuff. And there, I know people that are like, how could you go out to dinner yourself? I love it. I just,
Hmm.
I feel like I'm doing something nice for myself and I'm okay with being on my own. I can talk to other people but even if I don't, I'm totally
Hmm.
fine with my own company. And
Yeah.
that's a big thing, it is, but anyone can do it. You just have to do it
Hmm.
one time and then it
Yeah.
gets easier, you know.
Yes. Yeah. A date with yourself. That was like one of my deep level self-care practices that I share with some of my clients. It's like just go on a date with yourself once a week. It doesn't have to be an entire day. It just has to be
Right.
something you do by yourself, something you love, and like something that you make sure you like really enjoy yourself. And then it'll
Yes.
become a
Yes.
practice that you're gonna protect. Like,
Yes.
it'll be like one of
Yeah.
those things where you're like, nothing comes in between me and my day, my weekly
Yeah.
date. It's
Exactly.
like
Yes. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
so how if you could like leave the listeners with like a tip on how to start, resetting your mindset, what would you leave them with? Something quick that they could
Well,
implement.
I think guided meditation is a great way to start. I started with guided meditation. I
Hmm.
now can, I've been doing it since I was 29 years old. So now I can just shut down and really be in that space, that silent
Hmm.
space, which I love. Sometimes it's like hard to come out because I just like, oh, so blissful. But
Hmm.
guided meditation, because I know people who really struggle with meditating. But guided meditation is kind of easy because you can go on and find, if you want to do guided meditation to raise your vibration, to be happier, whatever you're searching, you can actually go on YouTube, find
Hmm.
and the one that you need to hear will be the one that you are attracted to. Like, oh, that one looks
Yes.
interesting. It just works that way.
Hmm.
When you seek, you'll find, right?
Yeah.
So then you just let this person and if thoughts come into your mind, don't, get angry at yourself or like, oh, get out of here. Just let it pass. Let it pass.
Hmm.
You're just new to this. And if it doesn't feel right the first few times, it's okay. Just keep doing it. I think meditation is a great way to quiet your mind because only when your mind is quiet can like ideas and opportunities and things come to you. Otherwise, we're constantly thinking and we can't we're not in the receptive mode at that point, and to
Hmm.
get in that receptive mode where you can receive what you need and what you're searching for. And quieting your mind, I think, is the first place to start. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you like wholeheartedly. I am a meditation instructor and I
Yeah.
create meditations for Aura, and
Oh, that's
it's one of
wonderful.
my favorite things to do is create meditations, and I create custom meditations for people also, and for my clients. And
Right.
yeah, it's exactly what you said. And I also try to tell people you could always start small too, because that's how I started. I have a very busy mind. I'm very kind of like type A, and so
Right.
like meditating doesn't come easy for me. And so, it's about setting the stage, like you said. Like now I can go into it, right? Because your
Right.
body knows exactly how to do it. So when you set the stage and you put little anchors around you, so like every time I meditate, I sit in this chair, and every
Right.
time I meditate, I use this pillow or this blanket. And then when you start to go into that chair and you grab your favorite pillow or blanket, your body's like, oh, we're meditating. So we're gonna shut down a little bit.
Right.
And just like with the thoughts, like you said, some people have some kind of an expectation that you can just shut the thoughts off. And you absolutely cannot. Like
No.
it's like saying, okay, I'm going to stop my heart for,
Right.
10 minutes. It's the
Right.
same as asking your heart to stop beating. Your mind is going to to always be thinking. And
exactly.
so as you exactly what you
But that's
said.
one of the things, meditation was another thing that helped me realize that there is definitely a being inside of me, a soul inside of me, because it's not just my mind controlling me. I've learned to control my mind, which
Mhm.
is proof to me that I'm separate from my mind. You
Yes,
know what I
you're
mean?
connecting with your soul, you're connecting with your
Right,
heart.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. And
yeah.
that was a big realization for me. And another thing I would like to say that, if there's things in your path, one that really keep bothering you and keep, they just stay in your mind, you have to know that the past really doesn't exist unless you give it thought. It does
Mhm,
not exist unless you give it thought. So you can choose. Like I have great memories in my past that I would choose to remember and think of. But there are things that I'm like, no, I don't want that alive in my life anymore. The abusers are not in my life anymore. Why am I allowing them to continue to abuse me? Why am I still thinking about that? Why am I giving that power and giving that thought? So for me, just a powerful sentence is the past does not exist unless you give it thought.
mhm.
That was like a huge for me years and years ago. Like, oh,
Yeah,
wow, yeah, you're right. It
yeah.
doesn't exist unless you give it thought. So
It's those simple things, that's it. And
yeah,
I think that's a perfect way to end today's episode. I think it was such a great conversation, but could you let the, listeners know how they can connect with you?
yes, just shirleybuck.com. That's my website.
Mhm,
The name of my business is Red Leaf Alternative Healing, but Um, ShirleyBuck.com is the domain that you can go to. And my book is Sweet Freedom Whispered in My Ear. You can get that on Amazon. And
okay.
I was just told that it's also being sold at Walmart now, which was a shocking thing to me. I was like, oh, wow, really? And so a few other places too. So I was pretty like, Walmart's got what? You know?
Yeah, that's
But
cool, cool.
yeah, so I'm in LinkedIn. My author name is S.A. Buck instead
Okay,
of Shirley Buck, but
okay.
um
Good to know.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So I'll put those links in the show notes so people can connect with you. And I want to thank you again for coming on.
Oh, thank
And
you for having me. It was really
yeah,
nice. I really enjoyed it.
yeah, and I want to thank you also for sharing your story because I think when people hear our stories that we share, then they could feel connected and they don't feel alone. And so I think it's
Right.
so important to share our story. So thank you for being open to sharing your story and sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you so much.